Marlena?
Yes, Maureen.
The live link to the website is not working. Linda cannot get in.
Is she having a spinning circle?
I just want to sit.
I'd like to call this meeting of the New York State Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government to order on October 6th, 2022. And I will forward over to our acting or interim executive director.
I simply want to say welcome. The meeting is being held pursuant to in accordance with the provisions of the state's open meetings law at both the commission's meeting room in Albany, meeting room we are using in the city state conference center at 25 Beaver Street will be open to the public and are open. I want to say
Thank you. And let me thank the commissioners for being here, as well as the staff, both here and in Albany. Any public that has joined us, welcome. And we'll proceed with the business as outlined on the agenda. And the first order of business is to approve the minutes from the September 12th meeting. Let me say before I ask for a motion to approve that you will notice that there are some maybe typos or inconsistencies in titles. We will clean those up as we proceed. But I wanted to make you aware that we are aware that those things are there. So is there a motion then to approve the minutes from September 12th, 2022? Is there a second? Second. So the motion was made by Commissioner BROADWAY and seconded by Commissioner Edwards. Are there any amendments, changes to the minutes? Hearing none. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion is carried. We'll now have a report from our staff. So I turn it over to our interim executive.
thank you. The operations update for the meeting can be found behind tab B in meeting materials. Say that first, the presentation is seen.
This meeting is being recorded.
A little bit different from the customary format, these sorts of things. And the reason for that is we wanted to capture both the activity that staff had undertaken under the regime of the prior administration, July 7th. We take the activity not on a monthly basis, but in the intervening period. And provide people with statistics. That's helpful for a number of reasons. First, the work of this commission includes continuing the prior work to the extent we have pending or open matters. Statutorily, they're carried over. So it's the commission to decide how to handle those going forward. And second, it gives a good idea of the level staff has. This is important to know, the level of activity that staff has maintained, challenges including staffing going forward. Staff is ready to answer any questions.
These are interesting statistics, but without the comparison of the prior year, very difficult to understand whether we've slipped behind, whether we're moving ahead, whether we have a problem or not. And I hope that at least by the next meeting, comparisons, we can see whether or not things have really slowed down or if there's a particular area that should be focused.
We can absolutely provide a prior year comparison.
You told you to speak up, it's breaking up a bit when you talk.
What I said in response to Commissioner Cardozo's observation and suggestion is that staff will go provide a comparison to the comparable period. Annual period. That's what the period starts. I will say that generally speaking, the levels of activity are in a court generally occur prior permission. There are some instances where of necessity there was less activity, particularly on the investigations and enforcement. Commissioners were confirmed in their appointments, the limitations on activity that we could undertake. With respect to all other aspects, we were thinking in terms of advice, providing guidance, overseeing filings, comment side, disclosure side.
Judge, this is Jennifer from Albany. The audio is breaking up a little bit on our end, so to the extent that folks are mic'd, if folks could just try to speak closer to the phone, if that's the issue, that would be helpful. Sorry for the interruption. Thank you.
Thank you. It's stealing microphones. They are active, but they don't indicate the level at which they're working. Do we know if these are active? Is this any better, Jennifer?
That sounds okay. It sort of goes in and out, but right now it's okay.
All right. We will find out. I should add to that, as long as we're talking about it on the guidance side, on the ethics guidance side. There's a good deal of activity undertaken in the intervening period, where we continue to provide guidance and advice to individuals who made inquiry. But we made clear that any guidance or advice is subject ultimately to ratification once the commission sees. We will be presenting those to you at a future meeting. But the numbers are reflected in the tables, in the operations report.
Any other questions or comments, Commissioner?
I have just a question. What's an e-blast under the lobbying?
So we send out a blast of emails, so to speak, a bunch of emails to the regulated community, the lobbyists and the clients, and send out information that way. And he'll get several e-blasts a year before each filing deadline to
Reminders or the guidance?
the reminders, sometimes they're guidance, both, and they go to the regulated community.
One question. Thank you.
So are you hearing okay in Albany?
It's still a little bit grainy and going in and out. It's not great, but we're, it's inconsistent.
I guess we'll have to soldier on for now. And when we break for the executive session, we'll see if we can make some adjustments. How's that?
Thank you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, and we should use our outside voices and our lawyer and preacher voices. How's that?
Definitely.
All right. So on job postings,
Yes, as authorized by our commission meeting, we have now made formal postings for 13 vacancies. There are still a number that have not gone out that I know the commission will be discussing later this morning. The period for applications for those positions remains open. We have done receiving applications. We have not had an opportunity at this point, it's a little early in the process, to make assessments of those. But we have received interest, both internally and externally, in applications for those positions. And those are positions that is important for us to have filled They affect a number of operating areas within the commission, a number of important positions, particularly within ethics and investigations and enforcement divisions of the agency. The postings appear behind tab C. Any questions?
What is the timetable with regard to these postings in terms of closing out applications and interviewing?
We're going to close them out at the 3-week mark. That's my intention, to the extent we have a reasonable number in for each position with eligible applicants who meet the qualifications for the positions. In the past, we attempt to interview several candidates for each position, and in some instances, as many as 5, recognizing that we have a lot of positions open now and challenges in terms of internal staff. We're going to have to meter that part of the project of building back up. But my goal is to get that done as quickly as we can.
So, Commissioner James, Commissioner Groenewegen, and Commissioner Woods.
Did the postings indicate the date by which that person should apply?
Yes, Mariana, do we have deadlines?
Yes, for the postings, yes, the deadline, October 28th. We give a 30-day.
So that's included somewhere else because it's not in the posting that you don't have.
When it goes up on the New York Jobs, it has.
Goes up on State Jobs NY, and then from there are other search engines that it goes out to. I don't know what those are, but it's like Indeed, Monster Jobs,
But it has the deadline on all of those.
and State. So yeah, so State Jobs NY will come down on October 28th. Normally for our website, we keep them up till the positions are filled.
So we also post on the agency website. But the primary posting, in a sense, is through the state posting, and that gets picked up by a variety of services. In the past, we've had instances where we haven't had sufficient interest or applicants we felt were sufficiently eligible for the positions, and we've gone to some other posting services. But it's a little early to do that now.
My question
Okay.
about the most
Commissioner
questions. Am I assuming this is the statewide search and not a national?
It's not limited. Particularly nowadays, everything's online. So we are not limiting the range of the postings. We haven't engaged any placement services. So we have not put any limit, but there are no restrictions. It's out there.
It's a national search and it reaches a national.
To my knowledge, it has national reach once it gets picked up. Well, everything's online. Everything's online. So
And this is going to be some outlet where, what do we do to achieve diversity in terms of the type of it's we access?
no, we have goals and objectives within the agency that are aimed at achieving diversity within the agency, and we feel we've been very, very good at maintaining the workforce. It's occurred in many respects organically.
I was really thinking about in terms of.
You just use the mic, Commissioner.
I'm just talking in regards to outreach, what sort of arrangements for things.
Well, we're posting on the New York Jobs website. We haven't affirmatively pushed it out to any other search engines, but we can. There's nothing to restrict us from doing that. And we can certainly look at additional. Any recommendations? Websites or job boards or anything? absolutely will utilize. At this point, with the rush to get out the large group quickly, first objective was to get it on the state postings.
Understand.
No, I get what you're saying.
I think, well, I'm just asking that we look at that. Because I'm sure we're assessing what comes back to us. Ways in which we can make sure that there's diversity.
We do, and we prepare periodic reports throughout the state composition for the workforce and of our efforts.
Any other questions or comments on the job posting?
Right, the next item is the budget report. That is on tab B. Yeah, for the second quarter. It's been a hybrid year. In a sense, the budget that had been submitted by the prior agency is not per se the budget that was provided by the state. The numbers correspond, the non-personal services component of the budget corresponds to the request we had made. So our assumption is that that's what we asked, the prior agency asked for, and that's what this agency got. On the personal services side, there was a substantial increase. I will say that the budget submitted by JACO was underwater. It met a flat calculation of the workforce, but didn't include statutory increases. So we had submitted a budget that, along with a side letter, asking for in excess of $600,000 in order to make up the shortfall. Budget that came in added approximately $2 million to the personal services side of the budget. And we have and we will be presenting to the commission at a future meeting recommendations that we have for positions that need to be filled because of mandates in the new law.
Commissioner Perkins.
Apropos of what you just said, if we're behind the budget now, given the fact that we have so many vacancies, it seems to me it's a real challenge here. We expected with more vacancies than usual that we would be more easily meeting on.
Let me, I may have misspoken. No, we're actually in better shape.
Oh,
We have more money on the personal services side. We have fewer people. We have to staff back up. Better than at parity once we're fully staffed up under the current plan. The challenge is going to be using the remaining amount, which isn't as generous as the legislature might have thought, because we were underwater by 600,000. So they may have been adding a nominal 2 million without any detail, because this was a budget bill that has no detail. It doesn't correspond to anything that had been submitted. So it's roughly $1,350,000 more that we have. And we have worked out detailed plans that we will present to the commission for filling out those positions. But presently, because we're down and because we're partway through the fiscal year, which began April 1st, see that we are
We're at 30% of budget halfway. Commissioner Edwards.
Question. Our budget's lower.
Commissioner Edwards' question was whether or not the budget's rollover.
to my knowledge, they are not. If we don't spend it, we will lose it. We have plans that we will propose to you, but we don't have an expectation of going overboard succeeding years. We have a lot of work to perform. That was not part of prior agencies' mandates by any means.
So if we were, if the 2 million additional, we were fully up and running, be within budget.
We would, yes, we would be, yes, we would be. Those resources, we would be within budget on the personnel side. We're running low at this point as well on the expense side, but it's going to kick up recently. We'll see the rest of other items that we have. Systems costs.
we'd be taking personnel and non-personnel, given the resources that the state has, the legislature has allocated, would we have enough money to run the agency fully up to staff, and if we were doing all the things on the non-personnel side that we need fully, would we have enough?
I don't want to prejudice the application we're going to be making shortly for next year's budget call. We have been alerted will be coming in shortly. So we're preparing for that. We have proposals that will utilize essentially the full budget.
Okay.
And it's a reasonable approach in the short term. Going forward, I think we want to talk about additional things we want to do. We will need additional funding. It will fill gaps that we have because of the added federal training mandate, which we'll talk about. So we'll be able to cover that and fill some other positions that positions we need to create various units to get where we want to be. But we're not going to be rolling in excess money by any means. We've gone through
May
this.
need more in the next fiscal year.
I think, and we'll talk about ideas we have for increasing capabilities in several areas within the agency, and those will require additional funding.
Thank
And
you.
I think
Yeah.
No, not at all. What is contractual services? What falls under that category?
those are very basic things that we provide. It's all the subscriptions, all of the computer licenses we have. If I understand correctly, Marianne has stepped out. Oh, there, it includes purchases of paper and
Yes, supplies.
those sorts of things.
Basically, office functional.
Yeah, our lease, utilities. That's it. All services, vendors, program. Equipment, travel.
Postage meter.
Postage.
Thank you.
All right. So now, we want to move to this.
I thought we just finished and put it several times in his.
Go ahead on the
But-
training, sorry.
No, I was going to say bite the bullet.
All right,
You know,
sure.
this
Go ahead.
is kind of budgetary perspective, the elephant. The current statute, new statute, ambitiously expands ethics training, formal ethics training. Call it live interactive, can be done on the internet. Individuals don't have to do it. Live interactive, comprehensive ethics training. This agency has been administering that course for a number of years. We have great expertise in doing it. Current requirement is that every 3 years. Yes. Policymakers, individuals, state system who are making approximately $105,000 annually as salary are FDS filers, and they've been eligible, required to take the mandatory comprehensive ethics training course every 3 years. We administer that in conjunction with the employing agencies. The agency has an ethics office. We train somewhere between 15 and 18% filers currently. They go up a little bit, and some years are down a little bit. The agencies, we're talking about somewhere around 30 or 35,000, under 40,000 individuals. Under the new statute, requirement is now extended to the entire state executive side workforce. There are requirements for the legislative side, training protocols, and we're to coordinate with them, but that's not our direct responsibility. We believe we're looking at somewhere between 230 employees now. And the cycle is now biennial cycle every 2 years. rather than every 3 years. There's intervening online training. That's with respect to ethics training. So whereas the responsibility now overall has had been intensive. Now it's going to be closer to
Or training.
for training. For comprehensive training.
Hi, Judge. I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you please speak directly into the microphone? It's very hard to hear you.
Sure.
We want to make sure.
Yeah,
We
could
get
you turn down your mic? Could you turn down your mic a little bit? It's very loud. Megan Hennigan, who runs our training unit on the ethics side, can talk a little bit in more detail about this, but there are many challenges in the agencies. Many agencies, MTA, for example, have employees who don't work at computers, who don't have state email addresses. Those agencies communicate with those employees by mail. These people are not online. They don't work out of an office. Many of them are parties covered by union contracts that would have to be amended to provide for training requirements for those individuals. They could be brought in. They might be entitled to comp time. They might be entitled to overtime. They might be entitled to some other increment. That has to be addressed. The agencies themselves and their ethics officers don't necessarily, but they're going to have to get the resources they need. We'll train their trainers. We'll have that capability. And we have part of the proposals, positions include adding trainers and adding assistant trainers to expand Megan's department so we can train more trainers put out there. But the agencies have to have the trainers. They have to have the facilities to be able to reach out to those individuals. That's on the ethics side. On the lobbying side, Carol's aegis. In addition to lobbyists who have always had a 3-year training requirement, Carol. And in addition, there's now training required for lobbying clients. And Carol can talk about the challenges just of that, of identifying. And Carol, do you?
Sure. So,
I'll use a mic, Carol, just.
Marlene, can you hear me?
If you could use a mic, that would be really helpful moving forward. If anyone is going to speak, just please reach your hand out for a microphone. Thank you.
Okay, so like the judge said, there was a requirement in the Lobbying Act to train individual lobbyists listed on a registration every 3 years. Now with the new law, clients in there also. So we are supposed to develop a training for clients as well. So we're working on that. We plan to launch it starting in January, this coming January, which works well with the lobbying community because every biennial, there's a new registration period. So we're going to launch it for that, which makes a lot of sense. The Lobbying Act actually has detail about the lobbying training requirements. So we're going to follow that, which is every 3 years. And we're just going to make a new training for lobbyists and clients together, and it'll launch for the next biennial. One of the major differences between the ethics training and the lobbying training is ethics has to be live. Ours shall be online. So it is much easier to administer. So the only challenge we have right now is the legislation just says client. And so I immediately was thinking, who's the client? Like who has to take the training? It's easy with the lobbyists, it's the individual lobbyists, the people that are lobbying. With clients, it could be an organization. Sometimes a client is a person, but often it is an organization. So our plan, and this corresponds with filing requirements in the Lobbying Act and our lobbying application. We're going to require that the CAO of every organization take it, whether it's lobbyist or client, and that would satisfy the training. So that is our plan for handling who is the client. Like I said, we're developing this. It's a 10-week process. that we're working with ITS to get this training up and running and to develop a tracking system, which is important to be able to track the training. So we plan to launch this with, like I said, with the next biennial. So that starts in January. Individual lobbyists, CAOs of lobbying organizations will have to take the training, and all clients, individual persons who are clients, or if it's an organization, the CAO will take the training. And like I said, we're going to work with ITS to streamline the process. There were difficulties in the past with lobbyists being able to get even to the training online. So we're going to work with them, with ITS, to make this more of a streamlined process. And now, under the regulations for the lobbying training, we would allow people 60 days to take it. If you get listed on a registration, you have 60 days. We're going to just follow the same, add clients in. However, since we're not going to be able to get this launched, again, it's going to take 10 weeks to develop, we're going to handle that. And we'll message this to the lobbying community with probably e-blasts and other things. We'll be messaging this to the we're going to say that any registration that comes in before January 15th for the 23-24 biennial period, they will have 60 days from January 15th. So they would have until March 15th to take it. Any registration that comes in after that, that lists individual lobbyists, that has a client on there, they would follow the normal procedure, which is 60 days from whenever that is. So that's how we plan on handling that, so that we make sure, since it's going to take some time to develop this with ITS, we don't want to shortchange people. We want to make sure they have a full 60 days to take the training.
Yeah, let me say this. Of necessity, we're going to have to stage the phasing in on both sides. Because it's a smaller contingent and less complicated on the lobbying side, we build that system first. And it's really going to be an adjunct to the current lobbying application that's already been built by OITS. Once that's completed, OITS will turn to building a much more robust system that we're going to need in order to implement the training requirement on the ethics side. Up to now, we've been using a system that really just adds in some additional fields to the financial disclosure statement filing system. That is a system accommodate this huge increase from 30 some odd thousand participants to 250,000 participants. The latest estimate from ITS is it's going to take them, after they finish this project, about 10 months. And that may be optimistic to complete the other system. In the meantime, what we're going to do, we will be advising, and may have begun to advise ethics officers at the agencies that we want all new hires who are required by the statute to take ethics training within 90 days of hire to be folded into the system immediately. So as new hires come in, they'll be scheduled for that 90-day training. So we're not falling behind on that part of the workforce, Commissioner.
The interesting requirements, but was the commission staff consulted by the legislature as to the practicalities of adding these requirements into the statute, or we're just looking at it now and saying, wow, how are we going to deal with this?
We were not consulted. The executive chamber had put in place last year by executive order an ethics training requirement. And it wasn't clear who was supposed to administer that system. So we did have some conversations with them about that. And ultimately, there was no resolution.
Well, I'm not sure anyone would disagree that we want to have as good a training as possible, but it's got to be practical. And have we considered consulting with some of the people in the executive chamber that maybe legislation should be proposed that would at least amend or give us a little more time to implement this? Because this sounds like, while it's a good idea, the practicalities of dealing with this may not be possible.
Yeah, just to that point, we had, after this came in, we did have some preliminary conversations with the chamber, and they were put on hold pending the appointment of commissioners so that we could have a substantive discussion about it. We do have a call scheduled for next week with the chamber. We now have a better idea of the time frame involved and the technical challenges. Again, Megan can give more detail if you have more questions about it. But at the agency level, there are real challenges, not just at our level. There are just building this monitoring system, which is why I'm cautious about talking about the budget is where it's going to go, because we're going to need more personnel clearly, just to do the training of the trainers, but also to monitor the system and feed the system once it's in place and to keep track of it.
At the agency level, are the issues both personnel and technology, or are they just the technology?
At our level.
At the employing agency. So it's technology and not so much personnel.
No, I'm sorry, technology and person. Both our agency and of course the state agencies.
So just so that the folks hear that the answer was that the issue is both personnel and technology, both at this agency and then across the employing agencies of the state. Commissioner Broadway.
I had a couple of questions. So the first thing is, are you going to, your FDS filers who have always had training, they're going to continue to receive the same training that they've always received. It's that new segment of the non-filers you're really having to grapple with, correct?
Yes, the audience will now increase exponentially, but as well with the FDS filers who have always had to go through this training every 3 years, now they're going to do it every 2 years.
Understood.
So that frequency has.
Understood. But as to that subset of the trainees, you've got all the new trainees that are non-filers. So their training is going to be less comprehensive than that for the FDS filers because they don't have to deal with it. So you've got a more limited training agenda for that larger group.
Certainly a different curriculum.
And that kind of curriculum already exists though for your FDS filers because their training was beyond that of just what they had to do as filers. So a lot of that curriculum already exists. It's not like the development.
And Megan and her group have actually revised or in the process of putting finishing touches, I would say, on a revised training program, training module that takes into account the greater span of job responsibilities and activities that are involved now. We were dealing with policymakers and those that have activity and supervision and more involvement. See this in one of the maps. Exemption being sought to filing. So bears on that. Responsibilities are different. They're adapting the training module to that. I thought your question was, what are we doing about those who are already in the cycle?
No, I'm more trying to get my head around workload and some of the logistical problems because you mentioned the number of executive branch employees who don't have access to email address. I mean, that when you consider the 30,000 correction officers and the bulk of the OPWPD workforce, I mean, the bulk of the state workforce are those direct institutional employees.
Yeah, it's MTA, SUNY,
Well,
the different side of that.
OPWD.
the Office of Persons with Disabilities. Yes. I mean, so I think that's a real practical question to be having, as I think Commissioner Cardozo suggested, with the executive chamber, because
Yes.
they're huge.
Commissioner, this is Megan Hennigan, and we've been worried about these issues, of course, as well. And again, just bringing up the MTA as an example, they're a perfect example, or those folks who might be driving the train at midnight. What Judge Berlin had said before, with all sorts of maybe labor issues, possible overtime or comp time issues. So we've definitely been thinking about these things.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I think we can say by way of summary, we have a significant task ahead of us to work out both these personnel issues in terms of capacity and technology issues. It's good to know that there are some subsequent conversations that are going to take place with the chamber and in other places to make sure that we're taking the most practical approach to this that we possibly can, given the current legislation. Thank you.
And we'll continue on.
And for those of you who can hear that, we're just going to continue on, and they'll keep us and you apprised of progress.
It's an important undertaking. We don't take lightly the mandate or the intent behind the requirement, but it's going to take resources, and it's going to take time to phase it in properly, and to have an effective working system, which is our shared goal.
We ready to move on? Right to item 4 on the agenda, the proposed policy for handling pending inquiries.
Thank you. I have distributed this morning to commissioners at the suggestion of the chair a proposed resolution, at least to consider, to address the requirement in NYCRR in 94.1C that with respect to pending matters and inquiries, the commission develop a policy for the handling of those in their review. Potentially, there are multiple ways to interpret the mandate. I think the one most consistent, both with that provision and with the modifications that have been made to subdivision 10, section 94, the provision that deals with investigations and enforcement. It seems to be that the most consistent and conforming way to address that is essentially to fold pending matters and inquiries into the current ongoing statutory requirement for how matters will be handled, where staff conducts what is called now in the statute a preliminary review of a matter to determine whether it warrants being elevated, is the verb that's used, elevated to an investigation by staff. The commission can do it as well, but the default system in the statute now is for staff to push these matters forward as matters come in, with reporting, of course, to the commission. And that's the regime that we follow and intend to follow going forward. Ultimately, when that investigation culminates to a point where staff is prepared to make a recommendation, either to close the matter because there doesn't appear to be sufficient evidence of the caliber that statute calls for a violation of the ethics laws or the Lobbying Act, or to try to settle the matter, or negotiate a proposed settlement of it, or to take the matter to hearing. At that point, the commission is presented with a recommendation that's called upon by the statute to vote on the hearing. Under the prior version of Section 94, the JCO effectively voted within 60 days after receiving a sworn complaint that stated a violation against an individual subject to the agency's jurisdiction, or it was a self-initiated investigation within 60 days of the issuance of a 15-day letter by staff. That intermediate voting provision no longer exists. Staff is responsible for conducting early reviews of any information that comes in that warrants consideration, then determining whether to go to a formal investigation, which triggers a 15-day letter issuance by staff, and then completes the investigation. Presumably with the use of formal process, not in every case, but typically there would be a request for process. The statute changes that a little bit and allows the delegation to staff of subpoena power, provided we have a regulation that provides for it. And the next item is a proposal for such a regulation. But what we were proposing is that the commission determined that the way to satisfy the requirement for review and a policy for handling these matters going forward be just that: fold these carryover matters into the same system that's going to be followed for every other case. We had one exception. The matter had already been noticed for hearing, which we have discussed at the past meeting in executive session. We'll have an update on that in executive session. But apart from that, staff's recommendation is that the way to comply with the statute is to treat these matters just like all new matters that may come in the door.
That only makes sense to me. Commissioner Cardozo, yeah. I don't know how else we can do it. So since I'd like to read the reso into the record, since the public doesn't have it, it's pretty short. If that meets with the agreement of my fellow. So Commission on Ethics and Lobbying and Government Resolution 20-02. Whereas the Commission on Ethics and Lobbying and Government authorized and called upon by Executive Law 94, subsection 1, subsection C, to establish policies to address any pending matters or inquiries affected by Executive Law 94 and review such matters. And whereas Executive Law 94, C, provides in pertinent part that Executive Law 94, quote, shall not be deemed to have revoked or rescinded any regulations that are issued by predecessor ethics and lobbying bodies, end quote. And whereas Executive Law 90, subsection 10, Executive Law 94, subsection 10 and 19 NYCRR Part 91 provide 9041 provide procedures and rules and regulations, respectively, for the handling and disposition of investigative and enforcement matters and inquiries by the Commission, including for the review of same by the Commission. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved that any matter or inquiry that was pending on the effective date of Executive Law 94, quote, pending matter or inquiry, unquote, shall be continued and prospectively shall be subject to and shall be handled by and pursued by the Commission and Commission staff in accordance with the procedures and rules and regulations, respectively, set forth in Executive Law 94, subsection 10, and 19 NYCRR Part 941, including as such provisions may be amended or otherwise modified. And it is further resolved that any, quote, 15-day, unquote, letters and responses thereto, and subpoenas or other process requests, appointments, or notices issued or otherwise propounded by the Joint Commission on Public Ethics or the staff of that commission shall remain valid and effective. That is the resolution. Is there a motion to approve? Second it, and we'll get commented. A motion to approve, Judge Cardozo. Seconded, Judge. I'm sorry. Motion to approve, Commissioner Cardozo. Seconded, Commissioner Austin.
Yes, if I may, a couple of friendly amendments. Thank you. A couple of friendly amendments. I think so that the resolution is clear that in the first whereas paragraph, we state that after Executive Law Section 94, that we include as amended on July 8, 2022, Ren Laws, 2022, comma, chapter. I'm not sure what the chapter is, but we can add that. In the second paragraph, whereas paragraph, that after 94(1)(e), we add in the word now provides. Similarly, in the third whereas, we should add now provides. And then in the first resolved paragraph, we add in the first line that was pending on the effective dates of amended Executive Law Section 94, comma, July 8, 2022, comma, just so that it's clear. And then I had a question. The second resolved paragraph refers to Jacob, but were there any pending matters that were before the prior commission that are still active that will appear before us with the Commission on Public Integrity?
Believes that there are none. Lori, are you on? Lori?
Yes, I'm on.
Do we have any CPI matters still pending, you know? I didn't see any
No.
CMS.
No.
Okay, then we don't need to say it. Thank you. Those are my friendly amendments.
And Commissioner Cardoza, since you made the motion, you accept
I
these?
accept.
Any other questions or comments? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor of the resolution is read into the record with the friendly amendments accepted by Commissioner Cardoza, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The resolution passes. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda, item 5, proposed regulation authorizing the issuance of subpoenas and other process by the executive director as delegated by the commission. The proposed regulation is behind tab E. This proposal will require a formal rulemaking of the State Administrative Procedure Act. And if approved, we will take the steps necessary to formalize that and publish the proposed regulation. In addition, we are asking that the commission also approve this on an emergency basis as necessary to effectuate and enforce the laws that fall within this commission's jurisdiction.
So can you talk more about what it means to approve it on an emergency basis?
An approval on an emergency basis puts the regulation into effect while the rulemaking is taking place. I believe for an initial period of 90 days, while the rulemaking is going forward. It can be extended at least 2 times for 60-day increments based on the same certification of necessity while the formal rulemaking is underway. But the effect of the rulemaking would be to publish the proposed regulation and to set a notice and comment period. And Carol, what is the outer limit?
It's 60 days public comment period. And the emergency adoption is effective upon filing. It could be today if we file it today. So to repeat that 60-day public comment period. And then the emergency will be in effect for 90 days. We likely will have to do another emergency adoption because we won't be able to get the comment period taken care of, meet and have a meeting. And so we'll probably have to do a second emergency adoption before we can fully adopt it on a basis a few months from now.
And the practical effect of this is that the executive director and staff have our authority to proceed with necessary subpoenas and other inquiries and conversations. Is that correct?
There's a second part. The first part of it implements the statutorily authorized delegation of subpoena authority. The statute provides for that if there's a regulation in effect. The delegation has been made. but there has not been, this is a new requirement under ECRA, a new provision under ECRA. This did not exist under the prior version of the statute. So this implements that delegation with respect to subpoena powers, and it does require that the executive director, before issuing subpoenas, inform the chair. That is going to take place. And in addition, we've added the requirement that the commission be informed at the next meeting of the commission that subpoenas have been issued. The second part of the warrants, so C, in this new regulation, will authorize staff in the course of conducting the preliminary review that the statute calls for when information comes to the commission's attention. And in conducting an elevated inquiry, it authorizes staff to make confidential disclosures of information as necessary to conduct an informal or formal investigation. In the past and even today on the agenda, you'll see there are a number of matters where staff is asking for authorization to reach out to various other agencies. Because subsection 119411 B continues to make confidential communications and investigation-related matters subject to approval by the commission. And it seems coordinate with the fact that subpoena power can be conferred on staff on notice to the chair, that similarly inquiries ought to be authorized to staff without the necessity of, in each instance, coming back for a commission vote. Staff has operated in the past under the other regime. It puts some delay into the system, but I don't want to suggest it's not manageable. It's something we can live with if we have to, but it seems to be out of step with the concept of the streamlined investigative process that the statute calls for. So it seems more coordinate with that.
So we have three things going on here, it seems to me. One is the emergency powers to then do these two things. Issue subpoenas with informing the staff, informing the chair, and then the full commission at the next commission meeting, and being able to have conversations about the cases for which you issued subpoenas without coming back to get authorization in every single case. Questions, comments? Commissioner Broadway.
My only comment would be, I heard the executive director say that part of the purpose of this is to effectuate the goal of streamlining the investigations. One of the real improvements that ECRA tries to make. I think it would be advisable in the notice of rulemaking that has to go with this filing, that be stressed, that it's being done for the benefit of the public that is served by the improvements of the statute, because I think those who are going to comment on it will have far fewer questions in understanding why this is there, that it's really just almost a correction to a drafting oversight, that this doesn't work quite the way they intended for maximum efficiency.
I think that's correct. I think various sections have not been, because they're in separate parts.
Right.
Of the statute.
So it's just really an efficiency matter to really effectuate the sole purpose of the statute.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions on this? This will be in effect as soon as we file it, because we're doing it on an emergency basis, and then we'll go through the regular process for promulgating a new regulation. If I'm understanding that. Okay. Sure. Oh, yeah, definitely. So are we ready to vote on this measure to delegate this authority or these authorities? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, let me back up. We need a motion. Okay, Commissioner Austin, seconded by Commissioner Cardoza. All right, now we're ready to vote. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Motion carries.
And Carol, do we need a second motion on the adoption, or is a single motion sufficient?
Single motion should be sufficient.
All right, then we're covered. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so next on our agenda is the formation of proposed committees.
Yes. For the sake of facilitating the functioning of the commission and for making meetings, formal meetings of the commission more efficient, the statute contemplates, certainly does not prevent, and general logic suggests that it would be helpful to have certain committees so that particular subject matter can be discussed in a more concentrated way between meetings by commissioners who have interest or expertise in the field. I've sketched out a few. These are purely recommendations on my part. Communications, I think, is an important area of interest. Certainly in moving forward, and it's not per se a matter of the commission's image, but so more the responsibility that this commission has to demonstrate to the public that it is committed to making as much information about its workings publicly known and publicly available as it possibly can within the constraints of the statute. And coordinate with the policy of the statute, which requires the striking of a balance between maintaining the integrity of investigations, protecting individuals who may be complainants, who may be subjects of complaints before information has been developed. But in any event, ensuring that the public can have confidence that this commission is hard at work enforcing the state's ethics laws. And not only is hard at work doing that, but is hard at work making as much of its work known to the public as it possibly can. I think that's something that really requires commissioners putting their heads together and figuring out how to wade through this really difficult area. It may seem simplistic to the outside world, but as you dig into the subject matter, it's quickly evident that it's not so easy a task. So I would recommend a communications committee, staffing and recruitment. It's important to me and it's important to my senior staff that we have the ability to try out ideas we have for small reorganizations, large reorganizations, creation of positions to meet new needs, talk about new initiatives perhaps that commissioners have in mind, and draw on the expertise of commissioners in the setting of a committee, as opposed to in the setting of a formal commission meeting, which will only take place so often. There's a good deal of work to be done there. Regulations and procedures, the statute calls upon the commission to be mindful of all the existing regulations, all of the existing advisory opinions that have taken place, and make a judgment. That has been the kind of provision that's been in every reform statute in the ethics area for several cycles now. Staff has many suggestions for proposed changes from a policy perspective, as well as changes that are necessary in order to conform the existing body of regulations, or to formally carried over into the statute, to conform them to the statutory changes. For example, we have a range of conforming changes to the enforcement and investigative regulations that need to be made. But we would like the opportunity to vet those changes and other changes that need to be made in a community setting. Education, as we've discussed, is going to be a huge area of inquiry. It's going to require a lot of attention. And then litigation may or may not be a requirement. It's going to depend on how much litigation we do or don't see going forward. And this is not an exhaustive list by any means. And I put this item is on the agenda for your consideration.
Thank you. Commissioner Austin.
Thank you. One of the things that I was looking at last night when we got these materials was just this question of formation of committees. And I was wondering whether we wouldn't be better advised, at least in the short term, to rather than have committees, have each member of the commission, as we currently exist, obviously shorthanded, liaise with each of the various areas of responsibility of the commission, so that, for example, Commissioner Cardozo would do the legal and Commissioner James would do the ethics portion, and Commissioner Edwards would oversee the investigation and enforcement section, so that there's a commissioner who would liaise with the heads of each of these divisions, at least in the short term, so that we would be able to communicate more effectively, and then ultimately, once we're in full force, create the committees that might be necessary to help us do our work.
Commissioner Cardozo.
I had a slightly different suggestion than Judge Austin's, and that is, well, I don't, obviously, each of these subjects have to be covered. I wonder whether we should want to strive for commissioners to have a particular area of quasi expertise, because, for example, on communications, wouldn't they be the best people who are on that committee to interview for vacancies, be involved in filling vacancies, and therefore each of the main subject matters that we have, training, filing, enforcement, should we have committees like that, and then each of those committees be responsible for dealing with vacancies, regulations, etc., rather than taking these subject matters, all of which have to be covered, and dividing them among commissioners.
So I have a third proposal, and that would be that Commissioner Cardozo, Commissioner Austin, and Commissioner Edwards form a subcommittee to go back, noodle over this, and come back to us with a recommendation. That you can vet it with us, and then we'll come back and we'll share with the public the benefit of your thinking on this after you've consulted with all of us and with staff.
So moved. Or second, I guess.
I guess you're moving it.
Well, I
can't move it on the sharing. So it's moved and seconded. Commissioner Austin, Commissioner Cardozo. Any more conversation about it? We have this subcommittee of Commissioners Cardozo, Austin, and Edwards. Any other conversation? Hearing none, are we ready to vote? All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and the motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, item 7, is an application for exemption from revolving door provision of Public Officers Law 73(8)(b). And I will turn that over to Keith St. John, who heads our ethics group.
I'm tempted to try to use my outside voice, but that might blow out some eardrums here, so I'll try to use this technology. Again, this is just an introduction of a matter that we'll take up in closed or executive session, because the substance of this particular application deals with the employment history of a former state employee. You'll remember from your robust training that you received just a couple of days ago that there is a provision in the Public Officers Law, the so-called revolving door provision, that restricts what former state officers and employees can do with respect to further communications with their former state agency. most notably the 2-year bar and the lifetime bar. The 2-year bar in particular prohibits former state officers and employees from appearing or practicing before their former state agency for the first 2 years of their separation from state service. What is before us for consideration this morning is an application that's authorized by statute to exempt someone or to exempt a particular state employee from those restrictions, effectively allowing the former employee's state agency to contract with that former employee in order to meet a particular need that the agency has not been able to satisfy without the resources and services, consultative services as they are, of this former employee. Section 73, subdivision 8-B, and let me get back up. Those post-employment restrictions, the revolving door restrictions, are found in Section 73, subdivision 8A. Section 73, subdivision 8-B creates this exemption that would allow the former agency to contract with the former employee upon the written certification that's provided to this commission by the agency's head that the former state officer or employee has particular knowledge or expertise or experience with respect to a particular matter which meets the needs of the agency and is otherwise unavailable at a comparable cost. So that sort of establishes the framework within which you will be asked to consider a request from the New York State Homes and Community Renewal for bringing on, not hiring, but contracting with for a time certain with this former employee in order to meet some particular needs that the agency is having difficulty meeting on its own with its current personnel.
And what action do you need from the commission now vis-a-vis this aspect of this request?
We need the commission's approval or denial of the agency request ultimately. But if there are questions about the individual, get into his work history or what happened, part of the criteria for deciding is whether the agency somehow contributed to this situation. I'm not suggesting there's actual issue, but that's one of the criteria.
So
Just determination.
So is the question before us now not the particular individual, but whether or not the agency should be allowed to do this? Is that the question before us now?
That is the question. I'm not suggesting that we need to vote on it this moment,
Right.
but today that question will be put to the commission.
Commissioner Grove.
Just to be clear, I thought I heard you say that we're not voting on a particular individual, but we are in fact voting on a particular, the authorization for the agency to contract with a particular individual.
That's correct.
I thought there was a two-step process. There is not. Is that correct?
It's collapsed in the statutes. It's an odd beast. The individual is prevented by the statute from appearing or practicing. Here, the agency is the requester, and they're asking that he be relieved of that prohibition, of that bar, so that they can contract. It's an odd beast in that respect.
I think I share Commissioner Groenewegen concern. Is our procedure then in dealing with this to just recognize that there's this request, address the individual and the circumstances in executive session, and then come back into active session and vote on it?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So we're acknowledging to the public that the request is here from this agency, and we will deal with it in executive session. Okay, thank you. So acknowledged. Thank you.
Then we'll come back to this after the.
Right. So new and other business.
The only item that I have is the question which has come up, per diem compensation of the commissioners. Under the statute, commissioners are entitled to per diem compensation based upon the amount that's paid, the annual amount paid to a Supreme Court justice in the state, divided by 220, allocated according to a 7.5-hour day of work, plus expenses. In the past, speaking of JACO, per diems were provided on flat daily basis for participation in commission meetings. That was the extent of it. The statute here neither prohibits nor specifically provides for compensation on a per diem basis for other activities that commissioners engage in course of performing their duties to the commission. But the question has been raised. I think at this point, perhaps it's too early for a fair assessment of how much non-meeting work be entailed by them in connection with the meetings.
So I'm going to ask that we have another subcommittee of myself, Commissioner James, and Commissioner Groenewegen to consider this and come back with our fellow commissioners and the public with a proposal. Is there a motion to that effect? Is there a second? So moved by Commissioner Austin, seconded by Commissioner James. Any discussion? All those in favor? Commissioner.
There's no other commissioner in consideration. I'm sorry. Outside voice. There's been no consideration. We haven't sat on board so much of this.
Well,
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I think we can take that under consideration when we deliberate on this. Right. The other thing I should just note, as I understand it, we would have to calculate, even though the per diem is based on a standard, that we would have to calculate it on a per hour basis. And that, okay, all right. So we're clear on that, and then this subcommittee will address it and then come back with some recommendations. Commissioner Austin.
Does this subcommittee have jurisdiction over disbursements as well?
Yes, we'll give it that jurisdiction if you made the motion. So if you'll accept it as a friendly amendment, and if there are no objections, we'll
Sorry,
proceed
can
to
you
look
just
at that as well.
repeat the last thing that was said about jurisdiction? We just couldn't hear it over here.
Yeah, he was asking if it has to do with disbursements as well. Will the committee consider disbursements as well? Was that clear?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thanks. All right. So a motion is on the table. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is, unless there's other new business or other business.
Hearing none, are we ready to move into executive session? Of motion? Then chair will entertain a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Public Officers Law 105 and Executive Law 94, subsection 11, to address matters concerning employment of personnel, pending legislation, pending litigation, an investigative and enforcement matter that is confidential pursuant to Section 94 of the Executive Law. And I think those are investigative and enforcement matters. pursuant to Section 94 of the Executive Law. And it's been moved by Commissioner Groenewegen, seconded by Commissioner James. Any discussion? All those in favor of moving to executive session, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Ayes have it. We are adjourned to executive session. We'll be back with the public comment on executive session at the end of it. Thank you.
Please wait until we have confirmation that I know we all do.
And you're live.
All right, thank you. We are reconvening the public session of this meeting, and we're going to have a report out on the executive session from our interim executive director, Mr. Berlin, and then we'll have one action item. Hopefully we'll adjourn after that.
Thank you. In executive session, the commission discussed matters related to pending litigation.
This meeting is being recorded.
The commission discussed an application for an exemption from post-employment restrictions pursuant to Public Officers Law, Section 73(8)(b). Commission authorized steps in a number of investigative matters and discussed several other investigative matters. And the commission discussed certain matters related to personnel. That's the readout.
Thank you. And then we have a motion on an application for exemption from Revolving.
That's item 8 on the agenda, I believe.
It's item number 8 on the executive committee's agenda, but number 10 on the public agenda.
That's number
It was number 7 and 10.
7 and 10. All right. As to that item, I would move to grant the application subject to the restriction discussed with staff.
A motion has been made by Commissioner Austin. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Commissioner Edwards. More discussion on this?
The restriction, thank you. Just to amend the motion, whereby the restriction would be granting a 1-year exemption with a statement that a second year would not be favorably applied.
That is the motion. Any more conversation, questions, comments? All right, are we ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion as stated by Commissioner Austin, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Okay. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Commissioner Austin.
All right, with regard to executive session item 5, an appeal by an employee for an FDS exemption, I move to add that to our open agenda as item 5A, and then table it until our next meeting pending a further report from staff.
So moved. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Groenewegen. Are we ready for conversation? And a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No. Carries. Any public announcements of actions from, we just did that. Is there any other business to come? There a motion to adjourn? The second? All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Let's have it. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thanks to the staff, thanks to the commissioners, thanks to the public. Thank you.
So we can get the next meeting in Albany?
Name?
The adjournment, just for our record.
October 20th.
Who seconded?
Oh,
it?
second, I don't,
Did you second it?
I don't remember. I'm a. We need a name.
Say that. Edward, thank you.